Cool. All right, now we're up and running. So, hopefully you've all applied for, you've created your Amazon accounts and did your applications for AWS Educate. Has anybody gotten that process done entirely? Anybody gotten the errors for signing up with AWS Educate? And, yeah. You got an error?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So again, if there's that issue, typically about the email address, contact their technical support. Unfortunately, they're slow. It generally takes about a week. So.
Yes, there are two. I was a little bit confused. There are two different AWS Educate and AWS.
So, well, okay. So what it is, right? Basically, AWS Educate is the program is basically the program with that USF has the agreement with AWS, which will give you the credit for the $100 credit for the year. To sign up for AWS Educate, you must first have an AWS account. So you create your account for AWS, then you can go to the AWS Educate site and basically sign up through that. For the AWS Educate site, the contact info you basically give has to be your USF EDU, so that then they know you're a USF student and all of that.
It did go through for me up there, but it was $75.
It was 75.
Yeah, there was an option not to create another like AWS account, like just to register for AWS Educate, and it gave $75.
Yeah, that one, right, you shouldn't, right, if you basically create your AWS account first, and then so you should not have to pay. Right, it should not be a cost for you. So the video will be up here, and you'll be able to kind of follow, and you will have an assignment on this, but I'll certainly set the deadline, realizing that, I know you guys are still kind of ramping up to get onto this and all that. Okay, so I am already logged into the AWS console like we saw last time. There is some different software, some software that we'll ultimately have to install to use and things like that. But I'll kind of walk you through some of this. Let me see. This is the site where where did they? There it is. Okay. And again, I'll have links. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to spin up an Ubuntu server within Amazon's cloud. There's a couple of different ways you can do this. One of the easiest ways of getting what they call the image is going to this site, Old Elastic, where they keep kind of a list of the latest Ubuntu images for these things. And again, I'll have the links, but you also have video as well. So once I'm logged into to AWS, I can go to the site here. You'll notice here it's basically showing me the latest versions of Ubuntu, the latest one being Ubuntu 6, and you'll see that we have these kind of two options for launching the servers. So you see PV and HVM. Basically, they deal with they have to do with different kinds of software virtualization, and one of the main differences has to do with how you actually are setting up your servers and so forth. So if you're a longtime user of AWS like me, which I assume none of you are, basically there's this thing called AWS Classic, where it made it like real. It's still fairly simple, but it made it really dead simple to start up a server. I just say, okay, here's the image, load up the server, I can set a couple of other things, I'm up and running. Once Amazon came out with their virtual private cloud, what they did is is for all new accounts, they basically created a default virtual private cloud in each of the zones, and so if you're sort of a newer user, you have to launch into a VPC instance rather than that. And so in that case, then generally you're looking at the HVMs. Okay. Let's talk about kind of what this all. There's a bunch of vocabulary. Okay. So notice instances, images. Okay. We'll talk about availability zones and so forth. Okay. So AMI stands for Amazon Machine Image. Okay. Basically, it's a hard drive image. So it's a hard drive image. There are ones that Amazon themselves create. There are ones that, so for instance, Ubuntu releases ones that can be used within Amazon. Community, within the community, if you're an Amazon user, you can create your own images that you can then either provide to the rest of the world and say, hey, so common examples of this, if you want to spin up a WordPress website and in Amazon's hosting, there's an image for that. You can just kind of find that, and then they give you the directions for doing it. Some of them are paid. Most of them are free. So that free to use. There's no additional charge to use that particular image and so forth. Okay, so that's the idea with images. Additionally, the point behind images and the fact that you can create them. Okay, so remember, I talked last time or mentioned briefly this idea of scaling and this idea of load balancing and so forth. Okay, so the scaling, which we can set up various features to sort of happen automatically, right? What it basically means is, okay, I have a server. Server's getting lots of load, right? So at some defined threshold, and we can control that threshold, what we now want to do is basically have a copy of that server. Okay. Now, how does that happen? We don't actually take a copy of the running server. What we have to do as we're setting this up, we get our server set up the exact way we want it, then we create an image, our own image, from that server. Okay. And so then, when we need to spin up another instance, instance basically is just a virtual server within Amazon's Server Center. All that means is just taking that image, spinning up a copy, right? And so we can do this lots and lots of times to hopefully handle all of the load. Of course, this also is predicated on having, for instance, a load balancer in place, which again Amazon provides services for, and so forth. And in certain cases, it also does require thought on the part of the web app development team. So as you're designing your web application, you need to sort of think about the fact that if I'm maintaining any state, how am I going to have these multiple servers access this and so on and so forth. Okay, so, but that's some of the machinery that's there. Okay, so instances, virtual servers. Images, hard drive image. Okay. Here, right, so we have our various regions, right? So you notice U.S. East, North Virginia, that's the default one. There's U.S. East Ohio, U.S. West North California, Oregon, Canada, some in the EU, etc. Okay. Again, because physics, right? If I'm building an application and I know most of my users are on the East Coast of the United States, then I'm probably going to want servers that are there, because the closer my servers are to my clients, faster communication, right? If we're dealing with global kinds of things, again, then we can start separating that out across these various regions as well. Okay. Within those regions, we also have availability zones, right? So within, for instance, North Virginia, again, so when you think about it, hard to, it's vocabulary, but it's, can't do that. It's common sense vocabulary, right? It's sort of common sense. So, I mean, imagine this. If Amazon only has one data center in Northern Virginia, is that reasonably good for reliability? No, right? I mean, one data center can be knocked out for a number of reasons. So then you'll see additional zones within there, which may be other data centers in the general locale. Okay. And again, so you can spread out across those as well. And so while Amazon doesn't make, again, when you sort of look at these kinds of failure tolerant systems and the numbers of 9 reliability and things like that, right? I mean, there may actually be some specific, but Amazon doesn't provide super high. It's up to you. I mean, look, we give you these tools for various places to access and so forth, and you can deploy your stuff across these things to maximize your own reliability. Amazon, like any other place, has had outages. Not necessarily total wide outages, but yeah, different individual data centers and so forth can go down. Different things can happen, and we plan for this, right? So this is sort of the main EC2 dashboard. I could actually create, in fact, you'll see right here, it says launch instance, and I could come here, and so if I do launch instance, right, it actually, it actually sort of pops up, gives me some various options. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to switch to Ohio because I believe, for you can use the Virginia one. I believe Ohio, I still have my default VPC, so I can kind of show you the what you would see there. I don't have my default VPC in the Virginia one. I have to have them recreate that. So these are sort of the main options in terms of some different images. So Amazon has their own sort of flavor of Linux that they use. You can use it or not. Notice there's SUSE, Red Hat. Notice here's actually an Ubuntu option. And as I said, you can actually run Microsoft servers in Amazon's cloud as well. Okay, and you see there's a number of these different kinds of things, perhaps different purposes, right? More Microsoft stuff, et cetera, right? So these are ones sort of directly, sort of the more official ones. Then you have your own personal ones. Yes.
What does free tier eligible mean?
Sorry.
Free tier eligible.
So free tier eligible. Yes, excellent question. Any of you who are just creating your AWS accounts are free tier eligible, which means for the first year, anything that's marked free tier eligible, you don't actually incur charges for. Okay, and generally they're sort of less, the servers that you pick for that are ones that don't have as many resources allocated to them, but for our purposes, they're generally fine. So yeah, so if it's within your first, again, it's a nice way of stretching that $100. Okay, so there's those, right? My AMIs are, if you create your own. There's what they call the Amazon Marketplace, where you can kind of you can sort of purchase perhaps, and again, sometimes there is some sort of fee for using these. Oftentimes they're still free, even though they're in the marketplace, right? And then there's the community AMIs, which generally themselves are free. And so you notice over here we can sort of drill down and filter out based on the particular kinds of servers we may be looking for and so forth. Okay, now. So you can certainly create your server there, picking the image and all of that. Generally, when I'm spinning up an Ubuntu server, I'm actually I kind of just come into to this. Let's see. So let me see. Oh, I may actually. Yeah, it's not. I'm going to do it from here because I don't know that one's going to go to the Ohio one that I'm going to need. All right, so let me pick, let's see, where's my Ubuntu? Yep, good, 64-bit, and you'll notice it is free tier eligible. So we click select. Okay. So once we clicked select, it asks you for an instance type. This is basically how much compute resources your virtual server is going to need. The more resources that your server has, the more you pay. Right? And it's tiered. So they kind of give you this these general notions, right? So general purpose, right? Notice T2 micro, that's free tier eligible. The number of virtual CPUs is 1, right? The amount of memory is a gig. The type of storage, all of those kinds of things, right? Network performance, right? And you can see, I mean, you can go to these large ones, and they have sort of very, very large ones and so forth. Moving on to for a lot of different kinds of purposes. We'll go cheap. All right. So I'll leave it at that. Let me do configure instance details. Okay. So right here, right. When you're choosing to spin up a server, I can right here automatically decide, hey, I need 10 servers right now. Right, so right there, number of instances. That's where if I change that, whatever I do, that's the number of virtual servers I'm going to use. Again, the more I create, the more I pay. Okay. Spot instances, I'm not really going to talk about right now. Okay. So here's the network information. So as I said, if you're an old timer like me, you don't always see this. All of you guys, this you're just forced into this. I don't even think you can opt into the sort of old way. VPC stands for Virtual Private Cloud. It's basically like creating your own little virtual network and subnets and all of that within Amazon. Okay. The nice thing is that Amazon creates default ones for you, so then you don't really have to worry too much about the details of that or how to. We're going to look at that. We're going to see kind of how to set up our own things and all that later on. So we'll create ones in addition to the default one. For right now, keep it nice and simple, right, the availability zones, right? So you can certainly pick a particular if you wanted a particular availability zone, or you just say, hey, you know what, you just kind of figure it out and let that take care of. IAM role, we're not going to have to worry about, right? The shutdown behavior, right? So stop versus terminate, okay? So we'll see. So a couple of things, right? The virtual servers. Free tier is going to help you because for certain parts of your running it, basically you're not charged. I do believe you might still be charged for certain, if you go over sort of certain access levels and things like that. Okay, most of the time, as your work, what I generally do, I mean, unless you have to have your server running, and then there may be times where for an assignment for you to get it graded, what it will basically, you'll set the things up, you'll give us the info to be able to check it. Once the TA's actually grade it, basically say, okay, you're done, you can take that down. Okay, so then we can sort of reduce the amount of time of those things. When you're turning off your server, you basically have two choices. Stop is just basically turning the server off. Okay. At that point, you're not accruing usage charges. You could accrue charges for the space for your image, right? Because when you use the image, then you kind of get your own virtual hard disk off of this, and that actually goes to your own storage part. And again, you get charged a small amount for that. The storage charges are generally not big. Okay. I will kind of point out the bigger ones. The one is. I got bit by, for 2 months, I was getting a $40 bill from Amazon. And I'm like, what is going on? Finally, I sat down long enough to track it down, and it turned out I had created my own VPC, and part of the VPC requires you have an internet gateway, and that thing was constantly running, so I kept getting billed for that, and anyways, you learn the hard way. All right, so. Default shutdown behavior. Stop basically says, yeah, just turn it off. Then you can kind of come back in. So if you're working on an assignment and you do a little work and you're like, oh, I got to go do something else, right? And I come back later another day. Just click stop. right? It's turned off. You don't have anybody. You don't have to worry about anybody trying to hack into it from the outside. All of those kinds of things, right? Good, good, good. Once you're totally done, or in my case, look at having virtual servers changes your view on almost everything, right? For instance, I want to try out a new technique on something, right? Some new software or whatever. So I might spin up 2 or 3 instances of the Ubuntu server. And I start working on one and everything. I start to get it to a particular point, and then I go, oh crap, it's not working. Or the server's hosed. Okay, terminate. Not only does it stop the server, it deletes everything. I lose all stored data, my image stuff, gone. Right? Okay, I just have another server then, no problem. Throw these things away. Right? I mean, and this sort of, this ability to take a server and just throw it away willy-nilly is incredibly powerful. It really does change your workflow. And really will make you more productive. Yeah, you can turn on, the protect against accidental termination. I don't bother. CloudWatch we don't need right now, etc. Let's just kind of take a look at these other details. Okay, user data. So here we have the ability to provide additional configuration for the server as it first starts up. So for instance, if there's software that you absolutely know you're going to want to have installed on your server, then you can actually write particular code here in a number of different formats to basically make that happen, if there are other configurations and so forth. So let me give you an example. If I go to GitHub, and yes, let me sign up. No, I had to sign in. There it is. Yes. And again, I'll link to this. So these are a handful of scripts. I haven't actually tested them against Ubuntu 16. These are actually just shell scripts for setting up some stuff. So for instance, this basic Ubuntu one. So there's a basic Ubuntu. There's a LAMP server, etc. So basic Ubuntu. Basically, so what are we doing? Notice the first thing I'm actually doing is changing the time zone. Right, so I'm changing the time zone to our Eastern time zone. For doing that, I'm actually changing some of the color things, so it just makes it a little bit easier to set up stuff and so forth. And then I automatically do an update and an upgrade. Okay, so what I can do is I'm just going to go to raw here, copy this, and I'm going to paste this in to there. So what will happen is, as the instance starts up, it will also get this script, and so once it's at the appropriate point, it will run the script to do these installs and configurations automatically. I don't have to worry about it. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I'm actually going to go to review and launch. Okay, so we get this kind of stuff, right? So notice it's it's telling me, okay, look, here's the instance type that I'm going to use. Security groups, that's what we got to talk about. Instance details, right? We'll come back to security groups in a minute, right? So notice I'm only launching one. You kind of want to make sure you didn't accidentally put 1,000 in there or something like that. Again, it burns through your money pretty quickly. The networks, all of those kinds of things. Storage is basically, so it defaulted in this case to an 8 gig virtual drive. Again, if I wanted to change that, I could go to edit storage and I could up the drive size and so forth. And then there's these various tagging types of options as well, which we don't need right now. Bless you. Okay, security groups. Security groups, good, but they can also bite you. Okay, what the security group basically is, it's kind of like a firewall. Kind of like firewall is. Okay, so essentially what you're going to do is you're going to say, here's, for instance, the ports that I'm going to allow people to connect into my server on, right? So in the case of a Linux server, most likely I'm probably going to want SSH to be open. We're going to try to install, I think, Apache on here. So I'll probably want to open up port 80 and so forth. So let me show you that. right? Again, initially, so when you start, it kind of gives you this launch wizard, as sort of default one for you. So these sort of default ones, I'll just put I'll give it that name. Here's kind of the description, etc. So notice it just starts off with SSH. Basically says the protocol. So again, you don't have to look up the known ports. Most of the common things, right? HTTPS, HTTP are here, etc. Source. Okay. Configured like this, what I am saying is that anyone, anywhere in the world, can try to SSH into this machine. Now, if that sounds like a bad idea, good, you're thinking security, right? An anecdote. So I periodically will spin up servers for doing things like peer evaluation surveys or things like that. I had such a server running, and since I am security minded, just for the heck of it, after about a day, I decided to kind of just take a look at the SSH log to see what kind of logins were coming in. Sure enough, you see, failed login for A, failed login for AA, failed login for AAA. Right? There's a person, there's a script running, right? Somebody's basically trying to find a password, basically brute force into my server, right? So, and the thing is, right? I mean, so if I leave this open to everybody, I'm paying for that too, right? I'm paying for that interaction for them to try to hack my server. Okay, so a couple of options that you can do. One, right? You can select my IP address. Right, so it's picking basically. In this case, this is not the IP of this machine. This is undoubtedly the IP address of the external router for this. And you can actually set up. You basically see it's a sort of CIDR thing and all that. If you're going to do this, and yeah, I mean, and we can kind of explore. I can look further to find out what the range is that that USF has, so that we can kind of. So basically, you can create a rule for sort of USF's block of IP addresses, and then you can have another one. So you can have multiple rules. So for instance, I could have another rule also for SSH, and I could do custom, and then basically I could have the IP, say, of my home address, something like that, right? And so you can set those up for additional stuff. Again, you can also use this like so, where I can say, okay, you know what? I'm going to allow HTTP traffic, and again, I'm just going to lock that in like so. Okay. So there's what I've set up just for this particular exercise. If I remember right, the rule what you are able to do. An instance once created, you cannot change the security group it belongs to. However, you may modify the security group, the rules for the security group that it is in. Okay. So in other words, I can't put this in a different named security group, but what if I realize that I wanted to connect to this server from home, I can come back in here and just edit the security group and then add in my IPs, and that will be fine. I don't even have to restart the server, right? Because this is basically kind of happening on the Amazon connection side. Okay, so there's so security groups. That's the deal with that. Yes.
So what is EBS only? It's a storage. It's an about.
Sorry.
EBS only. It's actually can you scroll up?
Scroll.
Instance storage.
Yeah, that's there used to be another form, but that's the one that's used. EBS only is pretty much the one that's just used now.
So what is that?
I forget exactly what it stands for. Elastic Block Store, maybe something like that. They kind of switched over to this EBS, and now you'll notice most of them also are using SSDs. Okay. All right. So that's that stuff for configuring it. Then we hit launch. There's still going to be one more. Okay. Now, this is the part that gets fun. Okay. So, again, being a... Okay, what? Okay, let's range. I should have several. Okay, but anyways. So, key pairs. We're talking about SSH keys. Okay? There isn't a password for your Linux instance, for the root user. It uses SSH keys, right? Generally, it's considered more secure because the idea is it's about something you have rather than something that somebody can just guess. Okay. So the first time through, you're going to want to create a key pair. Okay, so I'll just call it. I'll call it. Now, this download, very importantly, first of all, this is the one and only one chance that I will get to download this key. If I screw this up, for instance, if you're using Internet Explorer, just resign the class now. I guarantee you, if you use Internet Explorer at this step, you're going to miss the opportunity to download it. Okay? The only thing Internet Explorer is good for is for downloading a real browser. Okay? Use Chrome, use Firefox, don't use Internet Explorer. All right, anyways, so I'll click Download Key Pair. So there it is. It's going to give me this this file here. Hopefully, and I will double check that it went to downloads. Yes, it did. Okay. So now that I know that I have that, I'll go ahead and say launch instance. Okay. Again, if you screw this up, if you lose this key, you can't connect to that server anymore. You can't change the key after the server is created. You basically have to throw away your server and, again, start up a new one. Okay, so it comes to this, it says, hey, your instances are now launching, right? It says this has been instanced, right? I can check out various things. So I can do, for instance, if I click on this, it takes me kind of back to the EC2 dashboard under instances with a filter just for the instance ID that I created, right? So I can give this, for instance, a name. I could say, okay, first CC, first server. All right, so just a little name. And basically, why? Because, for instance, if I take out this filter, oh, that's right, I'm in Ohio. Yeah, I don't have anything else in Ohio. In Virginia, I've got a whole long list of things that aren't currently running. They are stopped. Okay. So, you know, it's not bad to label this and so forth. Okay, so you can see it says it's initializing and all that. The public, this public DNS, oddly named, that's basically the address you're going to use to connect to your server. We can't do that yet. Okay, so the SSH key that we download is not in a format that the Windows SSH client that we will use, namely PuTTY, can deal with. Okay, so how many people have used PuTTY? Okay, a couple. What? Oh, yeah. Okay, so PuTTY is a Windows SSH, and it's also Telnet client. Okay, so if you have a Windows machine, you'll use PuTTY. If you have a Mac, it's OpenSSH, and you can just use those. And I'll actually sort of point. I'll have a link in there for kind of the Mac instructions for setting this up as well. Okay. The download stuff for PuTTY. So let me give you a little. I think I have it installed here, so I'm not going to have to install it myself, but I do want to make sure to point this out. You can install the individual PuTTY programs individually, right? So I could just say, oh, give me PuTTY itself, right? However, there's actually a few tools in here that we're going to need. So you're really best off just downloading the installer and installing the whole shebang. Okay, so that's the first thing. So, right, I have 64-bit operating system, so I would use the 64-bit one. As I said, I believe I do have PuTTY installed. Cool. All right. Now, as I said, PuTTY can't use the key that we have downloaded. What we need to do is to convert that into a format that PuTTY can. And what we will do is to use one of the programs that gets installed when you install PuTTY, PuTTYgen. Okay. So notice it's the PuTTY key generator. Okay. So if you take a look at this PEM file, it's just text, right? Now, notice, this is a private key. Generally, you don't want to share this with people. You don't really want to be, for instance, like making a video for an entire class that's going to be out there and all of that, and like sharing this so that they could technically, any of you could technically steal this and connect to my server. I'm going to get that server down before you'd have a chance to do it anyway, so it doesn't matter for me. But you get the idea. So that's kind of what that file looks like. You want to treat this as something that you do want to, in fact, that you want to secure. Okay, but that's basically what that looks like, just text file. All right, so what I can do is I'm going to load, right, so notice, load an existing private key file. Okay, and then I will navigate over to downloads. Now, the one thing, I don't see it in downloads. Why? Because PuTTY has this wonderful, helpful feature of only showing me the PPK files by default, so I got to go to all files. Okay, there we go. So now I got the PEM. All right, then I can select the PEM and open that up. Right, it says yes, we've imported this, blah 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 blah. Okay, cool. Pass phrases. So as I said, generally, SSH keys are preferred to passwords to log into your server. You can provide a passphrase for the SSH key itself. It's extra protection. Basically, what it means is if somebody gets their grubby little hands on your private key file, if you have a passphrase installed on it, they can't use it unless they also know the passphrase. Okay? So generally, certainly for production kinds of systems and all, you really want to do this, right? I mean, for these that you may or may not, I tend to usually just add one anyways. It adds like one small step, and I'll show you kind of what that is and how we deal with that and all that. So let me go ahead and just add a password to this. Okay, so I did that. Then I'm going to come and I just want to do save private key, right? It's a private key. I'm just going to save a private key, right? So I go to there. And again, we're in downloads, right? Having this as PPK, that's what I want. That's the format that that PuTTY plays with, right? So I'll just say cc demo, and we'll do save, okay? And then I will go and double check. Let me refresh this. Yep, there it is, the PPK file. Okay, so now I'm set. I can close that. Also, the PEM file I can totally destroy, right? So I can drop it in the trash. Again, if you're really security, you want to use like a secure eraser or something like that. I mean, whatever. I'm just gonna for now. Again, I'm not gonna ever use this key beyond this class, this particular class, so I'm not gonna be as careful. All right. Good so far? The good news is, right, once you, because typically you don't create a new private key for every server, so you usually kind of have maybe a handful of them, and it stores them, you know, so you can sort of pick from the existing keys and then you just use them and so forth. So this isn't a step that you always have to do every time you start a server. In SSH, so because of the fact that you can have a passphrase on an SSH key, here's the problem that you run into. Every time you use that SSH key to log into a server, you're going to have to enter in the passphrase. Now, if you're doing a lot of log onto the server, log off the server, log onto the server, log onto this other server, this is going to suck. So there's what's known as SSH agents. SSH agents allow you to load up the key for a session, say like while you enter the passphrase for that key once when you first load it, and now as long as the agent's running and that key is loaded, you can use that key without having to enter the passphrase again. Okay. To do that in Windows, again, because you've used the installer, it sets up the file association with all PPK files. So all you got to do, right? When I double click this, okay. Notice, it says, hey, what's the password, right? So I enter that. Then somewhere, yeah, so there's the little icon of this. The program that it's actually running is called Pagent, right? The PuTTY agent. And you can see, so there's basically the key that has been loaded. So I can do add key, I can remove key, etc. Right? Or if I shut down Pagent, then again it sort of forgets about this, and I won't be able to connect. So you have your key, you have to load it up in Pagent. Now you're ready to connect to your server. Okay, this is I'm keep beating on this. This is one of the common things where people miss it. They forget to load it up in Pagent. And they can't connect. Yeah, can't connect because. Okay. All right. Now that I have that, let's run PuTTY. Okay, so there's PuTTY. So PuTTY needs to know the server that we're logging into, right? So as I said, right, so you notice status check instance, it is running. So the server's ready to be connected to. So that's good. Let me go ahead and grab this. Right, so I will copy that and I will go back over to PuTTY, maybe. Here we are. Okay. Now I will paste that. Actually, sorry. Even before I do that, let me do this. For this to work, when you are connecting using SSH, you have the ability, and in fact, you need to do it with this, to specify the username that you are logging in as to the server. And the way that you do that basically looks like an email address. So you give the username. In this case, if I remember right, it should be Ubuntu. That's the default user that they create, and then I will paste in my public DNS. Okay. I can do a couple of other, one other thing I typically will do, I usually come to appearance here because it uses kind of a small font. So I'll actually make that a little bigger. Yes?
This username was provided like on the configuration page for.
It's right. It's basic. It's determined by the image, the Amazon machine image. So generally, so Ubuntu tends to use Ubuntu. The Amazon Linux ones tend to use EC user, and so forth. Okay. A lot of times too. Then I'll also that. So I will save this session as well. So I can call it the EC2, and I'll do a save. Right, so there it is. Now I should be able to do open. Okay, the first time you connect to your server, it's the typical SSH thing because it doesn't have the server's key, right? So it wants to kind of make sure, yeah, we're expecting that. Right, and there, notice, I'm in. That's what you should see. Okay, again, there are a couple of ways you can screw this up. Not loading your private key with Pagent, you will not get in there. If you screw up the security group, right now, if I go home and I try to connect to this, it's not gonna. It will time out. Right? It's going to time out because the security group says, well, only things that are kind of coming out of here. Okay, and it won't tell me that. It'll just say time out. Okay, so when you can't connect to your first, obviously check that the server's running. If the server is if the server is running, check your security group. Make sure you typically I make sure you've loaded up your key, and then check the security group. Okay, those are the two things. All right. So there is that. Now let's see. So a couple of things. So in terms of some basic Linux systems administration. Yes?
Those user data, it was run. It was run. Did you provide it?
The script, yes.
LAMP server is installed.
This one, no, I didn't actually select the LAMP server. See? So netstat allows me to see sort of what things are listening on various ports and all that. So there's nothing listening on port 80, right? So I don't have my server running just yet. Okay. So and as I see, we could have done that. I kind of want to show you a little bit about. So With Ubuntu, generally the way of installing programs and packages and so forth is to use the apt utility. And so I can do, but what we basically need to do, we need to actually do, we need to do it at least once, is this command. Apt get update, and actually the script that I sent to this does this automatically. But if you didn't have that or whatever, plus if you think that there are actually, if you haven't run this in a while and you think that there are software updates, running this will connect to the appropriate servers to find out about these, right? So you notice when I run this, I get this nasty error. Okay, so what's this error about? Basically, the user account that I'm logged in as isn't by default the super user, the Unix super user, right? So how do we get around this? Sudo. Okay? Basically says run this as the super user. There, now it's happy. If you want to know about, if you want to search for particular packages, I mean, obviously you can do web searches and so forth. Apt cache is the way that you can, this one doesn't have to be sudoed, okay? And we can do search, and for instance, I could do something like apt cache search Apache, right? And here's all the things that are somehow related to Apache, all the different package names and all of those kinds of things, right? A lot. Okay, so Apache is a particular web server, one of the widely used ones. It's gotten a lot of competition with Nginx now, Lady, but it's still fairly widely used. We could manually install all the different things, and so basically what I want to do is get what's called a LAMP server up and running. Anybody heard of that term, LAMP? Okay, so if you haven't, no big deal. What LAMP stands for is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. Okay, so basically a general web server that will allow you to have a database backend and all of that. Again, I can use apt-get to install the various things myself, but Ubuntu has a tool called taskcell. Now, if I remember right, I think there's this issue. Yeah. Okay. In 16, it's not installed by default. Up until this, it was always there. Okay. So sudo apt get right, so this is how you install a package, right? Use apt-get, make sure you're the super user, use the install command, the name of the package, right? So it says, okay, yeah, here's what's going to be installed and all of that. Sometimes they also give you recommended things to install with it. In this case, they're not. Do you want to continue? Notice the Y is capitalized, meaning that's the default. I can just hit enter and then it will do that, right? There it is. It's installed. The pretty small package. Okay, cool. So let me run that. Yes. Okay. So now that I have this, okay. So choose software to install. Right. So I'm just going to kind of using the down arrow key here to do this. I want. There it is. Okay. So there's LAMP server. Hit space to select that. I'm going to hit tab to go over to OK and hit enter. Okay. So it goes through, says basically is installing it. Of course, it asks you to create a password for the root user for MySQL. Again, and no, I mean, you don't have to, but obviously that's a security hole. So yeah, set a password. Now, if this seems like a lot of work, I mean, it's a moderate amount, right? As I said, first of all, the key stuff. You don't always have to be dealing with the PuTTY gen and all of that. EC2 is designed for maximum configuration. Okay. So if you're the kind of systems administrator that wants to have full hands-on control of exactly which packages are getting installed and and highly configuring it up, EC2, this kind of way is to, and again, I mean, you see that I can actually also sort of add this into scripts to be run as it's loaded, but nevertheless you can do that. If you want easier ways, there are easier ways. We will see those. Okay, there are where you trade off kind of that maximum flexibility for spinning up something, spinning up a Ruby on Rails server or whatnot. Okay, so it is there. All right, let me. So let's talk about a couple other things, right? So how many people are sort of Linux command line comfortable? Okay, cool. So let's right. So basic Linux, ls directory listing, right? You notice it. First of all, it says it doesn't show anything. I guarantee there's other stuff there. ls tac a is for all. That includes any file or directory that begins with a dot. Okay, so you can see when I did ls, there's nothing there, right? And then I do, well, give me all of it. No, there is, right? Dot by itself refers to the current directory. Dot refers to your parent directory, right? PWD shows you your current directory, right? So I am in the from the root of the hard drive, right? On Windows, this would be C:, right? Linux doesn't do it that way. We just have kind of the root of the file system, so it's /home/Ubuntu, right? So if I do cd ... that takes me to /home, right? To get back, so if I do an ls here, I can see there's one thing. It's highlighted in this fashion. We know that that's a directory. Another way of finding out, I could do this. I could use the tac-l option, which is long. Okay, so the long option, right, shows me first. One of the first things is this D means directory. Okay. Clear is good for clearing the screen. ls, you can combine them. Tac-a and tac-l gives us all that. So let's take a look at what's here, right? So by default, it kind of highlights different things in different manners and stuff like that, and we'll kind of start to learn. So it looks like this little cyan is oh no, it's not for directory. Yeah, it's directories, right? So the first, as I said, this first thing is whether it's a directory or a file, right? So for instance, .bash logout doesn't have a D, it's not a directory. What's this?
Permission.
Those are your permissions, right? So there are three things for three different groups, so to speak. The first three are for the owner of the file. Who's the owner of this file? It's right here. The user Ubuntu, me, or the owner of that directory, right? Who's the owner of bash rc? Me, right? Notice the parent directory is actually owned by root. Okay. What's this? Why is this duplicated? That's a group, right? So the user Ubuntu is in the Ubuntu group, the user root is in the root group. There are other groups, etc., and you can create your own and all those things. The group permissions are here, the second set of three. Finally, we have the permissions for the world. What do these mean? R means readable, W means writable, X means executable. Okay. So notice, for instance, the bash logout file is readable by the Ubuntu user. It is writable by the Ubuntu user, but it's not an executable file. For the group, it is only readable. For the world, it is only readable. Okay. You can change these using chmod. So, for instance, if I created my own script, in fact, I guess I'll do this quick. Echo. So the echo command, well, kind of does what it says. echo hello, prints out hello. I can use this. I can use this in combination with redirection operators to easily create a file. So notice, nothing gets printed. This says, I write this text to the file named hello. There's hello. Now, I can't run the hello file because its executable bit is not set. If I want to run it, what I need to do is set that. So I can do this in a number of ways. I can say, okay, if I only want the user to be able to execute it, I can say, okay, for the user, turn on the executable bit, right? I could do it optionally for the group. I could do it for all, right, etc. There's also a funky numeric code for kind of setting all these. I'm not going to go into it. You can look it up if you want. Okay, there's that. I might have actually messed this up. Let's see. Oh no, there we go. Right. So notice, to run a command, to run a file that is executable in the directory you're in, you actually have to put /. It's a security issue. It basically prevents people from sort of inserting their own perhaps nefarious code for commonly used Linux commands. Okay. How do you get help for Linux? Okay. Certainly, Google's always your friend. But Linux has its own help. Man pages. Right? So you can use the man page. You can even use the man page to find out how to use the man command. Man. It's an interface to the online reference, blah, blah, blah. Kind of pulls this up. This is pager. I can hit Q for that. So, if I wanted to learn about echo, right, there's that. If I want to learn about the options for ls, okay, there's all of that, right? So it shows me how synopsis, ls, the options, the files, right? Here it starts to give me information about the various options. Sometimes you'll find, sometimes they will have examples, sometimes not. Another thing is info. Okay, so info doesn't always work for everything. Let's see. Yeah, ls. Info kind of gives you a little bit more information about topics and so forth. These are actually hyperlinks, so I can hit enter for that. I think it's what is it? No, backspace to go back. Again, Q to get out of that. Also, most Linux commands will respond to the there we are. We'll have either a tac h or like tac help, which basically gives you a very quick synopsis of how to use the command and so forth. Okay, the Linux philosophy is to give you a ton of commands that all basically do one and only one job very well. Okay, and we will then see you can actually string these together using pipe operators to get fairly complex types of commands, types of behavior, just by kind of putting together these really simple commands. Okay, notice again. So they have, they even have a thing about info for that. So in PuTTY, if I select this and then I just right-click, that will paste that in, kind of show all of that. Right, so that gives you somewhat of a good idea. To get rid of a file, it's RM, remove, like so. You can make a directory. Okay, touch is used for a couple of things. It's used when there's an existing file that you want to sort of update the last modified time. Think of things like revision control and stuff like that. It's also, touch baz, right? I can also use it like this to create an empty file. Right. If you want to see the contents of a file, so let me do this. So for instance, the .bash rc, basically what that is, it is a number of configuration options for bash, which is our shell. If we want to view it, remember, less is more. There is a more command that does this. Less kind of has more. That's the one that I usually use, right? So what less does is it's actually paged output. So you'll notice it basically shows me one page. I can hit space. I can hit B to go back. There's ways of search. So if I do H, that gives me all the help commands. So you can do searching and all of these kinds of things. If it's a smallish file, or if you're really not sure, one option you can do is this. Cat. So what cat does is basically just takes the contents of that file and dumps all of it to the screen. Doesn't do pagination, so if it's a long file, it'll just be kind of scrolling along, right? But certainly I can kind of scroll back to view that and so forth. Related to those, maybe you only want to see the first few lines of a file, or the head of the file. Bash. There is tab completion, so notice when for instance, if I type .b, I hit tab, it actually writes out bash. I can do the R and then hit tab again. That also works on commands as well. Right, so there's the first few lines of the bash rc file. If you want to see the other end, it's the tail. All right, I showed this before, netstat, ANTP, so notice, right here is the entry saying that there is some process running on this system that is listening on port 80. Port 80 is the well-known port for a web server. So so a web server is in fact running on this machine now, since we did the LAMP install. How do we test that? How do you contact any web server? You could ping it too, but I mean, most of the time we just do this, right? So I'm going to grab my public DNS. I'm going to copy this. My server is running, right? And just to show you that, so for instance, let's see. No, it's not. What is it again? I'm having a brain fart here. That's service. Oh, it's the other way. Service, Apache 2, notice works for that as well. Stop. Yes, right. Wait. Sudo that. Okay. So now, Unix. The Linux shell has a history. So for instance, hitting the up arrow takes me back through that history, right? So I can go all the way back, I can do forwards, I can then modify it, etc. If you want to see your history, you can by typing history. Right? Notice it kind of scrolled through everything. So if I wanted it paginated, I can use the pipe command and pipe it to less. See? Commands do simple things, put them together, life is wonderful. Right? I can easily very commonly, I will use this to search for something, right? So maybe I was sort of doing this and I went, oh wait, what did I touch again, right? And so I can do, so grep basically says search for this particular term. So we pipe the history list and says, oh, okay, here's everywhere where we talked about touch. So some stuff that you can do is one thing is if I wanted to rerun a particular command, I could note the number that is listed here and use that like so. Alternatively, right? Maybe I don't want to go through the part of saying, okay, give me the whole history, because I knew it was the netstat command, but I just didn't feel like retyping that whole thing. So I could do something like bang net. What it will do is it will search back through history to find the first one that matches starting with net, and there it is. The main reason I'm running netstat again is I want to show you that, notice the port 80 thing is gone because I've stopped the server, which means if I come back over here and reload, okay. Real quick, because we're running out of time. But anyways, so where is, okay, so let me actually restart it. There it is. Nope. Oh, yes. Cannot type today. S U B O. So where is that page? Right, there it is there. It lives in var dub HTML. Right, index.html. There's the raw HTML code for that. Now, a couple of things. Notice, we don't own this directory. Okay, so how do we modify files? How do we do our stuff and all of that? We can use sudo. We could change the permissions. I'm just going to do it this way. So, for instance, I could say sudo move index to index old. Right, there that is. So you'll notice that actually if I come here, now we just get that kind of weird thing. And then I could actually create my own using a text editor. There are a number of text editors that are installed by default. You can install other ones that you get into the whole Vi versus Emacs debate. Emacs. Kidding. You can use whichever one you want. But for really quick edits, Nano's like super handy, right? So here then I could just do H1. Okay. The way you deal with Nano, these carets are basically hold down Control and then hit that. So for instance, now if I just do Control X, it says, hey, do you want to save this? Yes, I do. All right, that's the file. That's fine. All right, and again, I can do cat of index HTML. There it is. Okay, let's reload this. All right. Okay. The most important part. So we have our server running. We are basically done with it. Well, done with the class. So I type in exit at the PuTTY prompt. That logs me out and all of that. Server's still running. So all I need to do, I can right click on here, right, go to instance state, and then here's where I have my options, right? So stop means shut it down, but still save all the data that the data on the drive. I can reboot the server, or terminate basically deletes it altogether. One note about stopping and starting again, you may see a change in the public DNS for that. Okay, so when you restart it, double check when you go back in to log in with PuTTY that you're logging into the to the same one. Okay, so you can stop that. And so you see it basically is shutting down, and then it's not running. Okay, See you next time.